Welcome back. You're watching live from Paris on France 24. The headlines this hour. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un give conflicting accounts of why their talks collapsed without a deal. The two failed to agree on how to proceed with denuclearization in exchange for sanctions relief. Pakistan agrees to release an Indian fighter pilot as a gesture of peace. Tensions between the two countries have escalated in recent days over the disputed region of Kashmir. And Israel's Attorney General says he plans to indict Benjamin Netanyahu on 3 counts of corruption and fraud. The Prime Minister has a chance to defend himself before he's charged. The decision comes just weeks before a general election. Well, after much fanfare, the talks between US President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ended abruptly. The two failed to reach an agreement on how to proceed with denuclearization in return for sanctions relief. Trump said that Kim was asking for too much, too soon.
Everybody having a good time?
And
It was about the sanctions.
Will there be a third summit, Mr. President?
Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that. They were willing to denuke a large portion of the areas that we wanted, but we couldn't give up all of the sanctions for that. So we continue to work, and we'll see, but we had to walk away from that particular suggestion.
Well, our international affairs editor, Philip Turl, told us more about how Trump and Kim have a very different take on what happened.
The North Korean leader is saying that he offered to dismantle the Yongbyon nuclear facility, which was one of the demands of the US, in exchange for a partial lifting of sanctions. Now, if you listen to what Donald Trump was just saying in that press conference, he was saying they wanted the sanctions, the North Koreans, that is, wanted the sanctions in their entirety to be lifted. Well, that's what he said during the press conference after he'd gone. He'd flown off back to the United States on Air Force One. It was the North Korean foreign minister who came out with the statement later saying, well, in fact, that wasn't true. We only wanted a partial lifting of the sanctions. So who's telling the truth in this matter? Well, your guess is as good as mine. The fact is that this summit, this much heralded second summit where a breakthrough was expected, some kind of big announcement about the denuclearization of the peninsula, the Korean peninsula, never came along, and it's a big disappointment, I think, for the organisers and for the two main participants, Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, and that might have explained why Donald Trump just suddenly turned around and walked out before the summit was due to officially come to an end and went back to the United States. He's reportedly talked to the South Korean President and Prime Minister about the outcome of this, and who said that he was backing Donald Trump. So we'll see what happens next, but it was a disappointment that nothing came forward.
A disappointment in terms of nothing was agreed, but there, as you say, it wasn't much heralded summit. There were a lot of photo opportunities, a lot of statements and all the rest of it. From a PR perspective, who came off best?
Well, the bottom line here, Laura, is that everyone's been saying that North Korea is not going to give up its nuclear program just like that. So this is a long, drawn-out process that I think even Donald Trump has been saying, well, I'm not expecting to reach an agreement anytime soon, which is certainly what not happened in Hanoi. So who came out of this on top? Well, you could look at the one side and say, OK, Donald Trump stood up for the United States. He didn't just sign a weak accord, give in to Kim Jong-un and sign whatever he wanted. So he did walk out and was the stronger of the two by turning his back on the North Korean leader and walking away from the talks. OK, that's fine. On the other side, you could say, well, the North Korean leader, he didn't do too badly out of this because he was seen again with the US president. They were seen sitting together, holding hands. They're reportedly in love with each other. That's what Donald Trump has been saying. So it's all good for the photo calls and the images of a man who, you have to remember, that just less than a year ago was a pariah and described as one of the worst murdering, brutal regimes on the planet. He has met since with the Chinese president and also with the South Korean president. So it's all been good for him as far as spin is concerned. Now, the only problem for the North Korean leader in this is that he needs to come up also with some kind of agreement with the United States if he's going to move forward. Because if you look at the age difference, Donald Trump is twice the age of Kim Jong-un. So there's a chance that Kim Jong-un will be around a lot longer than Donald Trump. So if if Kim Jong-un doesn't agree on something, he might have to deal with another American president later who's not quite so open to the idea of discussing directly with North Korea about dismantling its nuclear program, and that could make relations a little bit more frosty.
Philip Turl there. Now, Pakistan says it will release a captured Indian pilot as a peace gesture as tensions continue to mount over Kashmir. Both countries have shot down each other's warplanes this week. It began with a deadly attack on Indian soldiers, which was claimed by a Pakistani militant group. Clement Bonnereau has the story.
Conciliatory words from Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan as he told lawmakers in Islamabad his government was focused on de-escalation with India.
We have captured an Indian pilot. We will release him tomorrow as a peace gesture.
Imran Khan's announcement comes amid soaring tensions between India and Pakistan over the disputed region of Kashmir. Islamabad says it shot down 2 Indian jets on Wednesday, later airing a video of a man it identified as the Indian pilot. The move was in response to an Indian airstrike inside Pakistan on Tuesday, which was itself retaliation for a deadly attack on Indian police earlier this month. That attack was claimed by Jaish-e-Mohammed, a separatist group which India says enjoys free rein in Pakistan. Addressing party workers earlier on Tuesday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi urged unity against what he described as the enemy.
Our country's brave soldiers are showing their strength at the border and across the border too. The country is one today, and we're standing with the soldiers.
Recent tensions have sparked fears of a full-blown war between the two nuclear-armed nations. Tuesday's airstrike was the first raid across the so-called line of control, which serves as the de facto border since 1971. Both sides are now under pressure to calm tensions, with China, the US and the EU calling for restraint.
Israel's Attorney General intends to indict Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in 3 corruption cases. The decision comes just 6 weeks before a closely contested election. Netanyahu will have a chance to defend himself before he's charged. He's suspected of wrongfully accepting gifts from wealthy businessmen and handing out favours in return for favourable coverage by a newspaper and a website. He denies any wrongdoing.
I intend to serve you and the country as Prime Minister for many more years. Don't believe all the spin. I intend to serve you as Prime Minister for many more years. But it's up to you. It's not up to the civil servants. It's not up to the television studios. It's not up to the pundits and journalists. It's only up to you.
Well, Sami Sokol is in Jerusalem with more on what Netanyahu is accused of and what happens next.
We've had here investigations held by the police for the last 3 years. They've been interrogating the Prime Minister, the dozens of eyewitnesses, and today the Attorney General, he submitted a document of more than 50 pages describing the wrongdoings of the Prime Minister. And according to the indictment, if it will go according to these lines, and we should expect that the indictment will not be very different from the kind of allegations we've seen today. Netanyahu will be imprisoned for years. Of course, this is there's going to be as we know, after the elections, he is going to have a possibility to have a hearing, and only after that there will be the indictment, and then according to that indictment, the court case. So we still have a long legal process. And actually what is fascinating here is that the Netanyahu supporters, they're rallying behind the Prime Minister, and they're saying that the police, the Ministry of Justice, the media, the left-wing parties, they're all allying against the prime minister. And the prime minister himself came out today with strong allegations against the Ministry of Justice and against the media. And he was also saying that the choice in these elections is between a right-wing government led by him or a left-wing government led by Benny Gantz, who will be backed by the Arab parties.
The UN Human Rights Council, meanwhile, says that Israel may have committed war crimes during clashes on the border with Gaza last year. 189 Palestinians were killed and thousands wounded. The UN panel says Israeli soldiers deliberately shot at unarmed civilians, including children. Israel called the report hostile, untrue and misleading. Naomi Lloyd reports.
Weekly protests at the Israel-Gaza border that left 189 Palestinians dead and more than 6,000 injured over a period of 9 months last year. Now a UN report says that Israeli security forces committed serious violations of human rights that could amount to war crimes.
We are saying that they have intentionally shot children, they've intentionally shot people with disabilities, they've intentionally shot journalists, knowing them to be children, people with disabilities and journalists. Some of the children, not all of the children are visibly children perhaps, but many of them are.
Israel rejected the findings, accusing the UN Human Rights Council of acting out of an obsessive hatred of Israel. Palestinians have been taking part in protests along the border since last March as part of a campaign dubbed the Great March of Return, calling for Palestinian refugees to be allowed the right to return to their ancestral homes in what is now Israel. The Israeli government says terrorists wanted to use the protests as cover to carry out attacks. UN investigators say demonstrators were unarmed and has called on Israel to carry out a criminal investigation.
Senegal's president has been sworn in, has won a second term. According to provisional results, Macky Sall won 58% of votes cast in last Sunday's poll. Opposition candidate Idrissa Seck came second with 21% of votes. All four of his rivals say they reject the results, but they also say they won't challenge them. Two well-known opposition figures were barred from taking part in the race because of corruption convictions. Sall campaigned on the strength of the economy. Maud Julien looks back at his presidency and what he's achieved.
Because of his rather discreet personality, Macky Sall surprised many in spring 2012 when he became Senegal's new leader.
I vow to serve faithfully in the role of President of the Republic of Senegal.
Before he was elected in 2012, this geologist from a modest and rural family had already served as mining and energy minister, interior minister, president of the National Assembly, and even prime minister. He grew as a politician in the shadow of Abdoulaye Wade, his mentor and Senegal's former president. They fell out in 2007 when Macky Sall, then head of parliament, raised questions about how Karim Wade, the president's son, was managing a government agency. Mr. Sall was gradually sidelined from power. In 2008, he created his own party, the Alliance for the Republic, and he toured the country, accusing his predecessor of bad governance. In 2012 and again in 2019, his campaign themes are economic and social development.
I am in favor of pursuing our plan for an emerging Senegal so young people can find more work, so women can be entrepreneurial and have all the support they need.
After 7 years in power, Senegal's fourth president no longer represents political renewal in the way he did when he ran as part of a large anti-Wade coalition in 2012. So for this campaign, Macky Sall highlighted his achievements and the need to continue implementing his program.
Venezuela's internationally recognized leader Juan Guaido has vowed to return to Caracas by Monday. He's been on a tour of Latin American nations in a bid to drum up support for his challenge to Nicolas Maduro. Tonight he's holding talks with Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro. Guaido is campaigning for the regime to allow international aid into the country via Colombia, but the government has refused. Well, that's it from me. Do stay with us on France 24. James Creedon up next with all the top stories from across Africa this Thursday. That's next.